She just turned away like I wasn't even standing there. No handshake, no eye contact, nothing. The woman whose money built the very foundation of that billion-dollar deal had been ignored in plain sight. And within 24 hours, the empire built on arrogance began to fall apart. But this wasn't just about a snub. It was about who held the real power all along. She was dismissed like a nobody. It turns out that she was the reason the $5 billion deal existed. This is the story of the deal destroyed by disrespect. Welcome to Blackstories. Drop your city below so we know how far our stories travel. The chandeliers of the Ritz-Carlton ballroom gleamed like constellations trapped in glass, casting a golden shimmer over the sea of evening gowns and tuxedos. The air hummed with the polite clink of champagne flutes and the low murmur of deal-making, every conversation dripping with quiet ambition. At the far end of the marble-floored expanse, the receiving line curled toward the stage where Vivian Hargrove stood, a vision of wealth and certainty. Maya Ellison moved through the crowd with a grace that came from years of knowing she would be underestimated. The emerald silk of her gown flowed like liquid around her, her diamond drop earrings catching flashes of the overhead lights. Her warm brown skin glowed against the deep green fabric, her hair swept into an elegant chignon that exposed the proud line of her neck. She smiled at those who recognized her, not that many, and kept her eyes forward. She was not here for recognition, she was here for business. The kind of business that reshaped industries. Vivian, in her champagne-colored evening dress, worked the line with the poise of a queen greeting her subjects. Each handshake was deliberate, her practiced smile flashing for the photographers stationed discreetly along the walls. Her perfume, expensive and icy, seemed to precede her as she moved from executive to executive, exchanging compliments, promising meetings, sealing unspoken alliances with the warmth of a grasped hand. The murmur of the room swelled slightly as the two women neared each other. Maya's position in the line wasn't accidental, she'd chosen to stand precisely where she could meet Vivian's eyes. It would be the first time the billionaire would see her face, the face of the woman whose silent capital had been the backbone of the $7 billion merger Vivian's company was poised to finalize. Maya's calm was intentional, each breath measured as she imagined the small moment of acknowledgment that would signal professional respect. And then it happened. Or rather, it didn't. Vivian's gaze flickered over Maya as if she were an object of passing interest, a painting on a wall she didn't care to examine. Her hand extended to the man standing just before Maya, clasping his palm with a firm, warm shake. She shifted to her left, her heels clicking, her hand already reaching for the next guests. The space where Maya stood might as well have been empty air. It lasted only seconds. The cameras captured it, but no one gasped aloud. The humiliation, however, struck Maya like a physical blow, searing in its subtlety. The absence of a handshake wasn't just a breach of etiquette, it was erasure. A public dismissal so swift it almost demanded the target doubt it had happened at all. The man behind Maya gave a soft, awkward cough, as if to fill the silence. Maya felt the prick of eyes on her from the side, curious glances from those who had seen but would say nothing. Her spine straightened imperceptibly, the way it always had when she was a child facing teachers who assumed she didn't belong in advanced classes. Her fingers curled loosely at her sides, hiding the tension in her hands. She would not let her face betray the wound. Vivian continued her circuit down the line, laughter tinkling like glass as she charmed another CEO. Maya turned slightly, enough to catch her own reflection in a nearby mirrored column. She was still the same woman, poised, powerful, and untouched by the gaudy spectacle, but inside, something was shifting. The moment replayed in her mind in fragments, the fractional pause in Vivian's gaze, the cool sweep of her eyes past her, the absence of physical contact in a space where handshakes were currency. Maya had built her life on making sure her presence could never be ignored. Yet here, in the center of a deal she had quietly constructed, she had been rendered invisible. Her phone buzzed in her clutch. A text from her assistant, seated near the stage. Cameras caught that moment, going to trend. She didn't reply. Instead, she drifted toward the far side of the ballroom, weaving through clusters of investors deep in discussion. The music from the live jazz band swelled and faded like an ebbing tide. Maya's movements were unhurried, almost regal, but her mind was sharpening with each step. She thought of the years she had spent navigating rooms like this, the polite microaggressions, the casual disregard, the constant need to prove she belonged. She thought of every mistaken identity, the times she had been handed a code at her own event, or ignored entirely until a white male colleague introduced her as the investor. She paused near the terrace doors, the cold breath of winter night seeping in through the glass. Beyond the city lights, Manhattan stretched wide and glittering, a living map of opportunity and indifference. Somewhere across the room, Vivian laughed again, the sound brittle and high, untroubled by the sting she had delivered. She didn't know who Maya was, not yet. She didn't know that the deal her company depended on would evaporate without the woman she'd just dismissed. And that ignorance was going to cost her. Maya took a slow sip of champagne, the bubbles sharp on her tongue. She felt the heat of humiliation cooling into something colder, denser. A kind of resolve that didn't demand immediate reaction but promised eventual reckoning. She turned back toward the crowd, her eyes scanning faces, committing to memory those who had witnessed and chosen silence. The chandeliers still glittered above, but the room felt different now, less like a celebration, more like a stage where she had just been handed her opening scene. Some insults, she thought, are better answered with silence. At least, until the silence becomes the loudest thing in the room. The next morning, the city seemed quieter than usual, as if the snow-gray clouds over Manhattan had swallowed the usual clamor. In the glass-walled expanse of Maya Ellison's penthouse office, the hum of the espresso machine was the only sound. She sat at her desk, legs crossed, the handle of a porcelain mug balanced delicately between her fingers. Her eyes, steady and unhurried, were fixed on the skyline, a horizon she had spent her entire adult life climbing toward. Her assistant, Taryn, stood by the door, shifting her weight as though she were about to deliver bad news. "It's already everywhere," she said softly, tapping the tablet in her hand. With a swipe, she brought up the now viral clip, Vivian Hargrove gliding down the greeting line, smiling, shaking hands, and then, the frozen moment when her gaze slid right over Maya as if she weren't even there. The footage was on loop, a slow-motion humiliation. The lighting caught the precise flicker of disregard, the turn of Vivian's head toward the next guest. It played over and over, accompanied by captions from different outlets. Did she really just ignore her? And business snub or something more? Some commentators called it innocent oversight. Others didn't hesitate to name it racism dressed in diamonds and silk. Maya didn't flinch. She had lived too many variations of that moment to be surprised. But this one was different. This wasn't a closed-door boardroom or a discreet networking dinner. This had been in front of hundreds of witnesses, with cameras recording from every angle. Vivian's empire had been on stage, and so had the wound she'd inflicted. Her phone buzzed with texts from colleagues, acquaintances, even distant family. Some offered solidarity, others quiet fury. But one stood out, a message from Lila James, a longtime friend and prominent civil rights attorney. "Don't respond. Not yet. Let her think it was nothing. Silence is strategy." Maya set the mug down, tracing the rim with her fingertip. Her mind drifted back, unbidden, to a younger version of herself, 15 years old, in a crowded Atlanta bookstore, waiting in line for an author signing. The author, a celebrated white novelist, had chatted warmly with the woman ahead of her, but when Maya stepped forward, he scribbled his signature without looking up. She'd walked away clutching the book, smiling for her mother's sake, but inside she had felt the same invisible weight she felt now. That day, she had promised herself she would never again let anyone else define her worth. And she hadn't. She had built Ellison Strategic Holdings from nothing, moving like water through the spaces that weren't built for her. For decades, she had funded deals without fanfare, letting CEOs take the stage while she worked in the shadows. She had mastered the art of controlling empires without ever being their face. But Vivian's snub gnawed at something deeper. It wasn't just that she'd been overlooked, it was the knowledge that the oversight came from the very woman whose company was about to be saved by her money. The $7 billion merger between Hargrove Luxury Group and a struggling international chain was already precarious. Without Maya's capital infusion, the deal would collapse within days. She opened the latest financial report, her eyes scanning the numbers with surgical precision. Vivian's liquidity was stretched thin, her other ventures tied up in slow-moving markets. If Maya pulled her funding, Vivian wouldn't just lose the merger, she would lose investor confidence, sending shockwaves through the entire luxury sector. Taryn cleared her throat gently. They're saying the press conference is in 48 hours. The signing is set for that afternoon. Maya leaned back in her chair, letting the statement settle. 48 hours. That was all the time she needed to decide how she wanted this story to end. She could walk away quietly, let the snub remain a private sting. Or she could move, not with rage, but with precision, the kind of move that dismantled power from the inside. She stood, moving toward the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city stretched beneath her like a living organism, every building pulsing with ambition and ego. She thought about all the rooms she'd been in where her presence had been treated like an afterthought. She thought about the board members who'd spoken over her, the journalists who had cropped her out of group photos, the junior executives who assumed she was someone's assistant. Her phone rang, the screen lighting with an unfamiliar number. She let it go to voicemail. Moments later, a transcript appeared, Vivian's office, extending a warm invitation for a private conversation before the deal closed. Maya's lips curved in the faintest hint of a smile. Vivian still didn't know. She was reaching out as a courtesy to a supposed mid-tier investor, unaware she was talking to the deal's financial spine. The humiliation of the previous night began to harden into something sharper. Maya knew the game. You didn't confront someone like Vivian in the moment. You let them walk confidently toward the cliff's edge, never realizing you'd been the one holding the ground together beneath their feet. She turned from the window, her heels clicking softly against the polished oak floor. Taryn, she said evenly, set the meeting. I want to see her before the signing. Taryn nodded, her expression a mix of apprehension and admiration. Should I prepare anything? Maya paused, considering. No. I know exactly what I'm going to say. The assistant slipped out of the office, leaving Maya alone with the city's skyline. Outside, the clouds had begun to break, revealing thin streams of pale winter sunlight cutting through the gray. Maya watched the light reflect off the mirrored towers, each beam shifting as the day moved forward. She thought again of Lila's message, silence is strategy. She had been silent for a long time, building her influence in a world that preferred her quiet. But now, the silence would end on her terms. Not in anger, not in spectacle, but in a way that would leave Vivian Hargrove unable to ignore her existence ever again. Maya picked up her coffee, now lukewarm, and took a measured sip. 48 hours. That was enough time to turn an act of dismissal into a reckoning no one in the industry would forget. Vivian Hargrove's office was the kind of space designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling glass walls framed a sweeping view of Manhattan, the skyline stretching endlessly beneath a winter sun. Every surface gleamed, marble floors polished to a mirror shine, a steel and glass desk so pristine it seemed untouched by work, and art so rare it required its own insurance policies. The air smelled faintly of orchids and power. Maya Ellison stepped inside without hesitation, her emerald wool coat draped over one arm, the heels of her black leather pumps clicking in a steady rhythm across the marble. She carried no briefcase, no tablet, nothing but a small leather folder clasped in her hand. Her presence was calm, but there was a stillness in her eyes that suggested calculation rather than courtesy. Vivian rose from behind her desk with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She wore a dove-gray sheath dress, her blonde hair smoothed into a perfect bob. Maya, thank you for coming, she said, extending a hand with the same polished grace she had offered to dozens of investors before. Maya didn't take it immediately. She let the moment stretch just long enough for Vivian to notice, then accepted with a polite grip, neither warm nor cold, but deliberate. They sat opposite each other at a small conference table near the window, the city sprawled out behind them like a silent audience. Vivian began with pleasantries, her tone light. I wanted to touch base before the big day. The merger is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for both our companies, and your contribution is, of course, appreciated. Maya let the words hang, studying the other woman's face. I imagine, she said slowly, it's the kind of deal that changes legacies. Vivian smiled faintly, misreading her. Exactly. I've been working toward this kind of expansion for years. She leaned back, crossing one elegant leg over the other. It's a pleasure to have investors like you on board. Quiet backers who trust us to do the heavy lifting. Maya's expression didn't change, but something in her gaze sharpened. Funny, she murmured, how silence can be mistaken for absence. Vivian tilted her head, a faint crease appearing between her brows. I'm not sure I follow. Maya placed the leather folder on the table and slid it toward her. You will. Vivian opened it and skimmed the documents, funding agreements, wire transfer records, controlling interest clauses. Her eyes flicked upward, then back to the pages, scanning the signatures. Maya's name appeared on each as the principal investor, not the secondary partner Vivian had assumed. The realization crept into Vivian's expression like a shadow spreading over water. You, she stopped, recalibrating her tone. You're the majority backer. I am the backer, Maya corrected quietly. Without me, there's no deal to sign tomorrow. No merger. No press conference. Just an unfinished contract and headlines about a collapse. For a moment, the room was still except for the hum of the HVAC system. Vivian's perfectly curated confidence faltered, replaced by something more brittle. She opened her mouth, but Maya leaned forward slightly, her voice low and precise. At the gala the other night, Maya said, you moved past me as though I weren't standing there. No handshake, no acknowledgment. I imagine you don't even remember it. That's the thing about moments like that, for the person doing the dismissing, they vanish instantly. For the person dismissed, they last much longer. Vivian shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her fingers brushing the edge of the folder. It was a busy evening. I had 100 people to greet. I certainly didn't mean. Intent doesn't erase impact, Maya interrupted, her tone still even. In our world, respect is currency. You can lose it faster than you can earn it. And sometimes, the people you think are invisible are the ones holding the foundation of your empire. Vivian's gaze drifted toward the window, the skyline suddenly less impressive. So, what exactly are you saying? She asked, her voice quieter now. Maya sat back, the city's reflection framing her in the glass. I invest in people who see value in everyone in the room, not just the ones they recognize, or the ones who look like them. If I can't trust that, I don't invest at all. The implication settled like a stone between them. Vivian's eyes flickered, calculation warring with pride. She wanted to salvage this, to smooth it over, but the certainty in Maya's voice left little room for negotiation. This merger is more than a business move for you, Maya continued. It's your legacy play. The story you'll want in the history books. But that story will never be written if I pull my funding, and I am very prepared to do that. Vivian swallowed, her posture rigid. I understand, she said finally, the words carrying the weight of someone realizing the ground beneath her had shifted. Maya rose, gathering the folder. Good. Then you'll also understand why respect isn't optional in rooms like this. You don't have to like me, Vivian. But you will never dismiss me again. She turned toward the door, her heels clicking with the same steady rhythm as when she'd entered. Vivian remained seated, staring out at the city as though it might offer an answer. The office, once a fortress of control, felt suddenly fragile, its vast windows more like exposure than strength. Maya didn't look back as she stepped into the private elevator. Her reflection in the mirrored doors was calm, composed, and utterly certain. The meeting had been short, but its echo would last far longer than the snub that had started it. In less than 24 hours, Vivian would find out exactly what it meant to underestimate the wrong woman. The morning of the signing broke clear and cold, the kind of winter day where the sunlight cut sharp and white against the steel of the city. In the penthouse suite of the Conrad Hotel, Vivian Hargrove sat at the head of a long mahogany table, her legal team spread around her like a protective wall. Stacks of documents lay neatly arranged, pens poised for the moment that would cement her $7 billion triumph. Cameras and journalists were already gathering in the ballroom downstairs, waiting for the announcement. Then her phone lit up. The caller ID was a name she now recognized with a heaviness she hadn't felt before, Maya Ellison. Vivian's throat tightened. She excused herself from the table, stepping into the adjoining room. Maya, she began, attempting warmth she couldn't quite manufacture. I've decided not to move forward, Maya said, her tone measured, almost soft, the softness of someone delivering a verdict, not a discussion. There was a pause long enough for Vivian to feel it in her bones. Not, move forward, she repeated, as if saying it aloud could make it less real. The numbers no longer add up for me, Maya replied. And as I told you, I only invest in people who value everyone in the room. Vivian's breath caught. She wanted to argue, to plead, but she could hear in Maya's voice that the decision wasn't open for debate. The line went dead. It took less than 15 minutes for the ripple to hit the room. The lead attorney, pale and tight-lipped, whispered something to the CFO. The CFO's hand went to his forehead as though bracing for impact. By the time Vivian returned to the table, everyone knew. Without Maya's funding, the deal's financial scaffolding collapsed instantly. There would be no signing. Downstairs, the PR team scrambled to draft a statement, their voices low and urgent. But news moves faster than press releases. By the time the first, delayed due to unforeseen circumstances, email went out, financial reporters were already posting that the merger had fallen apart. Stock tickers flashed red, Hargrove Luxury Group shares plummeting in real time. And then came the digging. The viral clip from the gala resurfaced, now reframed in light of the implosion. Side-by-side headlines appeared on financial news feeds, merger collapses hours before signing. Next to watch the awkward moment, billionaire Vivian Hargrove ignored key investor. Business analysts dissected the footage, some calling it a symbolic fracture, others openly discussing the optics of a white CEO publicly dismissing a black woman who had been quietly bankrolling her empire. Old stories began to surface, anonymous accounts from women of color who had worked under Vivian and left, citing a culture of exclusion. Photos from past events where she was surrounded by executives who all looked like her. Each revelation added another crack to the image she had so carefully built. While Vivian's team fought to contain the fallout, Maya was nowhere near the Conrad Hotel. She sat in the sunlit corner of a quiet cafe downtown, a steaming cup of tea in front of her. Across the street, a mural stretched across a brick wall, a black woman's face painted in bold strokes, her eyes looking out with unflinching strength. Maya's phone buzzed with notifications, messages from journalists, congratulations from colleagues, partnership offers from companies eager to work with her. She let most of them go unanswered. When a call came from a primetime news anchor she respected, she picked up. The interview was set for that evening, a live broadcast. The anchor's first question wasn't about the handshake, it was about power. Maya spoke plainly, her voice calm but resonant, about the quiet erasure of black excellence in boardrooms, about how often women like her were left out of the narrative even when they were the architects. She didn't mention Vivian by name, but the implication was as clear as glass. By the time the interview ended, social media was flooded with clips of her words, tagged with hashtags calling for equity and accountability. Her following tripled overnight. More importantly, the conversation had shifted. The story was no longer about the collapse of a merger, but about the culture that made such a collapse possible. That night, in her Upper East Side apartment, Vivian sat alone in the dim light of her living room. The city glittered outside, but she couldn't shake the feeling that it was glittering for someone else now. Her phone was silent except for alerts about the plummeting stock price. Every attempt at damage control felt too late, too small. The narrative was out of her hands. Across town, Maya stepped out of the television studio into the crisp night air. Cameras still flashed in the distance, fans and reporters calling her name. She didn't linger. She simply walked down the sidewalk, her heels clicking against the concrete, the city's hum rising around her. She had no need to gloat. Her victory was in the silence she carried, the unshakable knowledge that she had reclaimed her presence on her own terms. As she passed a shop window, she caught her reflection in the glass, poised, grounded, unflinching. She smiled faintly. Some reckonings were loud. Others, like this one, were seismic, and they left the world permanently altered. Thank you for watching, but this story was more than just a snub. It was proof that the most powerful person in the room isn't always the loudest. If you think justice like this deserves to be heard, smash that subscribe button, turn on the bell, and drop a comment about the most shocking power shift you've ever seen, because the next story, it's even bigger.